Hey, in the last video, we talked about the 3 parts of an essay. There are thousands of videos on the internet that will talk about thesis statements and topic sentences and bodies and conclusions. But there are many different styles of essays. Even the essays you are expected to write in British and American universities, who both use English, are totally different. And it's really important that what we learn to do is write an IELTS essay. What is an IELTS essay? Well, it's an essay that satisfies the IELTS band descriptors, because satisfying them is the only way to get a high score. And that's what we're going to learn to do in this video. Come on, let's begin. The IELTS exam assesses your writing task 2 in 4 areas: task response, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. Now, if you have watched the task 1 videos where I talk about the band descriptors, you will see that these are very similar. In fact, there's only one major difference. In task 1, we have task achievement, not task response. Why? Well, in task 1, you are given a very direct task. Write a report or write a letter. There is a correct or incorrect way to do this. For academic students, the correct way is to have an overview with key features to include all of the statistics. And for the general students, for your letter, it's to write a letter that is the correct register, formal or informal, and includes all of the details. However, for task 2, we are asked to respond to an essay question. There is no correct or incorrect response. Therefore, you cannot achieve a perfect score. You can only respond to the item. However, even though task response is different, coherence and cohesion, or how understandable and how logical our essay is, that's the same. Lexical resource, or our vocabulary, we will also be assessed on this. And again, grammatical range and accuracy, how complex your sentences are compared to how few mistakes you have. And again, like task 1, we could divide these 4 areas into 2 sections. We've got 2 sections that test our language, that's lexical resource and grammar. And we've got 2 which test our academic ability, task response and coherence and cohesion. These are about our academic skills more than our language. So to start this video, I want you to work. I am going to show you 12 marking criteria, and I want you to tell me which section of the band descriptors do these criteria come from? Is the criteria from task response? Is it from grammatical range or accuracy? You have to match them. For each area, there are 3 criteria. Are you ready? Pause the video, off you go. Okay, we're going to start with task response because this is the most different from task 1. Here, the 3 criteria were: addresses all parts of the task, presents a clear position, and extends and supports main ideas. We are going to look at all 3, starting with addresses all parts of the task. I cannot tell you how important this criteria is. I have marked hundreds of essays where the students think they have addressed all the parts of the task, but they haven't. And I think the best way to show you why students make this mistake is to look at some practice questions together. Let's start with this one. Today, people are living longer and longer lives, and this is causing problems in some countries. What has led to this situation? What problems is it causing, and how can they be solved? Okay, so in this question, how many different parts are there in this task? How many parts do we need to address? How many do you think? 3. It's quite obvious for this question. We need to talk about what's causing this situation. Why are people living for longer and longer? It could be good nutrition, better housing, better medical care, but you must address this inside your essay. Second, what problems is it causing? What do you think? Why is it a problem that people are living for longer? Well, we must support them in their old age. Governments must pay pensions for longer. Old people need more expensive medical care. It's all about money. And finally, how can we solve this issue? It's easy. Let's just shoot all the old people. No, I think this really means how can we solve the problem of money? Maybe we can introduce new taxes on old people. Maybe we can have old people still working somehow while they are capable. You may think that it's rather obvious there are 3 parts to this task, but I have seen so many students who somehow forget to explain the problems. They often remember to describe the cause of the problem and to offer solutions, but they don't clearly state what the problems are. If you don't do this, you will receive a low score for task response. Let's look at another one. Many people think that schools should spend more of their budget on sports facilities than music facilities, because being healthy is more important than being musical. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Okay, so again, how many parts are there in this task? Well, on the surface, you may say 1, because the question says, to what extent do you agree or disagree? So you just have to agree or disagree. With what? What exactly are we agreeing or disagreeing about here? Well, definitely we need to compare the importance of sport and music. So if you just compared music and sport, would you address all parts of the task? No, because this is not just a question about the importance of music and sport, it's a question about schools and their budget. Where should schools spend money? You might think that sport is more important than music, but does that mean schools should spend more money on it? That's a different question. So to address all parts of this task, you have to say if sport is more important than music and whether or not schools should spend more money on this. If you forget the schools and the money, you are not addressing all parts of the task. Let's move then to my final example. Some people think that exams are a good way of assessing a student's level. Others believe that they put unnecessary pressure on young learners and tell us nothing about their real ability. Discuss both sides and give your own opinion. Okay, so for this essay, how many parts are there? What must we do? Well, the question clearly tells us to discuss both sides. So even if you really strongly agree with one side, you must still give some arguments for the other side. If you don't, you will receive a low mark for task response. Also, you must clearly tell the reader what your opinion is. Which side do you agree with? If you forget to do this, this will also affect your task response score. And this particular question leads us on to the second assessment criteria. Gives a clear position. What is a position? Is it like yoga? No. A position means a clear opinion or clear idea. If the question asks for your opinion, you must make it very known in the text. It must be obvious what your opinion is. Again, this sounds simple, but many students have problems in this area. I'm going to ask you to pause the video again, and I want to show you one student's answer to this question. And all you have to do is tell me, what is the writer's position? Who do they agree with? Do they think tests are a good idea and valuable, or do they think they are stressful and a waste of time? So, pause the video, find the writer's position. Okay, how was that? How easy was it to find the writer's position? How long did it take you? 30 seconds? 10 minutes? Forever. Because the writer of this essay does not have a position. They very nicely discuss both sides, but at no point do they clearly tell the examiner what their position is. This writer will lose a lot of marks for task response. And it's a shame because this essay is well written, there are no grammatical errors, it's got good lexical resource, but without an opinion, it's going to do badly. So, if the question asks for your opinion, make sure you give it. And make sure you have a consistent opinion. If you say you agree with something at the beginning of an essay, please make sure that by the end of the essay you haven't changed your mind. This is another thing I see all the time. It's like, as the students writing, they convince themselves that their original opinion is wrong and they try to change it in the middle. Don't do this. It's a massive mistake. Let's look at what I mean. I'm going to ask you to pause the video again. I'm making you work in this video. We're going to look at an essay that was written in response to the schools and health and music essay. I want you to read the introduction and the first paragraph and to tell me, is the writer's position consistent? Do they have the same opinion in the whole of the first paragraph? I think you can guess what the answer will be, but pause the video and tell me. Okay, let's break this down together before we look at the answer. Let's look at the introduction. Schools today have ever decreasing budgets and need to think carefully about where to spend them. I believe that more money should be spent on music than sport for 2 reasons. What do you think about this for an introduction? I think it's excellent. The first sentence introduces the general topic. It tells me, hello, I'm an essay about schools and where they should spend their money. And the second sentence clearly answers the question. No, I disagree. I think we should spend more money on music than sport for 2 reasons. So then, what problem do we have in the body? Because the body begins very strongly. They have a lovely topic sentence. Firstly, the primary function of a school is to educate a child's mind. They're telling me why they think music is more important than sport. They then continue to say that children can study sport outside of school, but not music. Good, 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 wonderful. But what's the problem? This. This final sentence is the problem. However, sports equipment is much cheaper than musical equipment, so some schools might want to spend more money on this area instead. What? Why? Your essay was wonderful. You told me music is more important. Let's spend money on music. Why then, at the end of this paragraph, totally change your mind? No, this means you don't have a clear position. Let's remove this terrible sentence, and now the writer has a clear position again. So don't make this mistake. Don't change your mind in the middle of your essay. And finally, for presents an idea and extends and supports the idea, well, once we remove this terrible final sentence, the writer does this very well. They tell me their main idea inside the topic sentence, and then for the rest of the paragraph, they extend and support and describe this idea in more detail. Okay, let's move on then to coherence and cohesion. How understandable and connected the essay is. Here, the three criteria were: has a clear central topic in each paragraph, uses cohesive devices, and logically organises ideas. Again, let's look at these together. The first one has a central main topic in each paragraph. We discussed this in the last video, and now you can see why it's so important. If you don't have paragraphs which have got topic sentences and one main idea, you lose marks in terms of coherence and cohesion. Next are cohesive devices. These are words which connect sentences and ideas together. If we return to our men and women essay from the last video, we can see that these are words like firstly, as a result, for example, in fact, secondly, also, in conclusion, therefore. These words show the relationship between ideas. They make my writing understandable and connected. We must use them. I have a video about transition signals, and that can be very useful if you find these words difficult. And finally, we have to logically organize our ideas. We saw in task 1 how important that is. And I think every type of essay has a different logical organization. So we will need to look at this in more detail in future videos. Let's move then to lexical resource. And actually, this is exactly the same as task 1. We need to use a range of vocabulary with precision, use some uncommon lexical items, and produce rare errors in spelling. So, like in task 1, we need to use our language with precision and flexibility. Can you write sentences that can only give a simple idea, or are you able to give a more complex idea using more difficult language? We also need to think about word forms. Can you use the verb form and the noun form of the same word? Again, we need some uncommon lexical items. This, in a way, is more difficult in task 2 than task 1. In task 1, we know the type of question and vocabulary we will need. But in task 2, the only way to make sure you have got high-level vocabulary is to learn topic-specific vocabulary. And there are many good IELTS books out there that can help you do this. You will find that 7 vocabulary words are often not one word. They are groups of words which collocate together. So for example, in this essay, yes, there are some single words which are high level, for example, like manoeuvring, but there are more groups of words which together produce high level vocabulary. Things like would invariably choose to employ, display higher levels of empathy, would be better suited to these jobs. These aren't singular words, but whole expressions which add to your lexical resource. And finally, you can have occasional errors in spelling. Can you spell occasional? That's a difficult word. But if your errors are persistent, if they happen again and again and they make it difficult for the reader, you will lose marks for lexical resource. And finally, grammatical range and accuracy. I think with task response, this is the most important area of the exam. What were the 3 assessment criteria here? Uses a variety of complex sentences, produces frequent error-free sentences, and has good control of punctuation. Complex sentences. Yes, they are important in task 1, but oh my life, they are the key to task 2. Because if you use complex sentences, you will not only improve your score for grammatical range and accuracy, but you will also increase your score for coherence and cohesion, because complex sentences show relationships between ideas. And they will also help your task response, because complex sentences will give you reasons and therefore they will help you extend your paragraphs. If you don't know what a complex sentence is, you should go to the first grammar video, Introduction to Complex Sentences, where I will explain everything you need to know. And I really recommend you do that before continuing. Again, though, we need a balance between complex and accurate, because if you are looking for a high mark, a 7, an 8 and a 9, you will need to produce sentences which are error-free. So although complex is good, if you can't write complex without mistakes, you won't receive the highest of marks. You will still get a high mark, but not the highest marks, not the 7.5s, the 8s or the 9s. And lastly, we do need to think about punctuation. Again, especially if you're targeting 7 or above. Commas, full stops, capital letters. The good news is that English punctuation isn't too tricky. What have we learned in this video? We have learned it's not enough just to write a good essay. We have to write a good IELTS essay. And the way to do that is to satisfy the band descriptors. The band descriptors for writing task 2 are very similar to writing task 1. We still need to write essays that have got good coherence and cohesion. They need to be understandable and logically organised. It's also important for task 2 that all of our paragraphs have got one main idea and paragraphing is clearly seen. Our lexical resource or vocabulary needs to be flexible and contain some uncommon items. So not every word needs to come directly from the thesaurus, but we do need 3 or 4 high-level terms to help us get a 7. The way to do that is to learn topic-specific vocabulary. And remember, every time you learn a word, make sure you can spell the word. Grammar is also extremely important. In particular, complex sentences. They are really the key to achieving a 7 or higher. But we need to have a balance. We need grammatical complexity balanced with accuracy. However, the more complex sentences you use, probably the better your score will be in every category, not just grammar. Perhaps though, the major difference between task 1 and task 2 in the band descriptors is task response. Here, we need to make sure we address every part of the task, and sometimes this is more difficult than it first appears. Also, we need a position. If the question wants your opinion, make sure you give your opinion and make sure your opinion is consistent. You should never, inside your essay, contradict your own previous statements. And if you do all of this, you will be on your way to receiving a high mark. So your job now is to go and do the practice activities, which will explain the band descriptors further. My job is to wait for you in the next video where we are going to talk about 5 common myths that confuse many students about the task 2 writing question. I'm Shelly and this is my IELTS classroom. Some students find the band descriptors restrictive. What I tell my students is imagine you are like Pavlov and his dogs. Your job is just to jump through the hoop and achieve a high score. So, play the game, draw the cat, and then move forward. But before you do, don't forget to do the practice activities. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you found the content useful, please click like to help the channel and don't forget to subscribe for new lessons every Friday. Plus, you can find more expert content at www.myieltsclassroom.com.